Hello again from Metro Manila, the Philippines, Southeastern Asia. This is the 22nd installment to my video series on the Ex-Adventists. Testimonies found on the former Adventist Fellowship's website. Most of these most of these Christians are former American Seventh-day Adventists, including the following man, whose name I'm withholding to protect his privacy. At the time of writing it, he had first been introduced to Seventh-day Adventism several years back when he believes he was still in high school, when he overheard a television broadcast that his father was watching. He explained to this man that the speaker was Adventist and commented that he was saying some pretty wild things. For example, that attending Easter sunrise services was a sin. When this man met his wife, she was going through some emotional problems. Then they talked a lot about her problems, and through talking with, they both found out that they were Christians. When she mentioned that she was a Seventh-day Adventist, the evening years before began to flash through his mind. Several times they argued over the Sabbath. They had other discussions about the Left Behind book series, which has been made at least into 3 films, probably or possibly 4, of which at the time the man was a strong proponent. The rightness or wrongness of the book series is not discussed here. It has been criticized, for example, for the fact that one of the characters, I think a Chinese American man, is drugged and then forcibly given the mark of the beast, even though according to the book of Revelations, it is impossible for a person to be forcibly given that mark of the beast. But those who refuse to take the mark of the beast because of their faith in Jesus will be killed, according to a literal interpretation of the book of Revelation. During the summer of 2001, this man's wife introduced him to Amazing Facts, a ministry led by a well-known American Adventist pastor called Doug Batchelor. And during that summer, she moved back to Florida from California. When the fall semester began, his study stepped up considerably. He met an Adventist, or had met an Adventist in one of his lessons or courses, and had told this Adventist about his inquiries. And this Adventist man invited him to the local Seventh-day Adventist church, and he attended a few services. While there, this Adventist man gave this man boatloads of reading material, including a copy of Ellen White's Desire of Ages, which he began to read that night. Following September 11th, 2001, he proposed marriage to his girlfriend, and then they started to make tentative wedding plans. He emailed his future mother-in-law telling her that he had been attending a Seventh-day Adventist church and had tried giving Sabbath keeping a shot. In other words, had experimented with keeping the Sabbath. And this woman's mother could not have been happier. About a month later, he accidentally stumbled upon the former Adventist Fellowship online. The first thing that really caught his attention and interest was Chaplain Dave DeFino's testimony. His statements about Ellen White were alarming at first, especially because this man was unaware of her prominent role in the church and was in the middle of reading one of her books. And then he started to, on the advice of this chaplain, study the Miller movement and Ellen G. White's role in it, and spent a good 2 months on Dirk Anderson's Ellen G. White site. The evidence was overwhelming as to Ellen G. White's involvement in the movement, the emergence of the Adventist Church, and its early beliefs. And fairly soon after concluding that study, he threw away desire of ages, and felt so ashamed that he had ever gotten himself so engrossed with Adventism. He got married with his bride in May 2002. And when they moved to their apartment in the city, this man's wife began raising questions that she knew challenged her beliefs. They read Galatians and Romans, and for the first time she began to see things that she had never seen before. And by personal conviction, she no longer could consider herself an Adventist. The truth had set her free. After about a year of study, this man not only familiarized himself with how to deal with Adventism, but began to realize God's wonderful grace. And read Bob George's classic Christianity a few times over, then at the time of writing this past summer, and then again with his wife. Several of the Seventh-day Adventist Church's doctrines, according to, for example, this man, are not just deceptive but cultic. When he read Dr. Walter Martin's exposition of Adventism from the 1950s, maybe he's referring to Dr. Martin's classical book co-authored with a prominent Presbyterian theologian, Donald Barnhouse, Questions on Doctrine, because they wanted to find out to what extent the Seventh-day Adventists' beliefs are in line with the Bible and with those of other Christian churches who claim to be Bible-believing churches, and to what extent are there doctrinal aberrations, and especially so serious ones that they cannot be just explained away with, for example, having an inferior spiritual understanding or being caught up in certain church traditions. At the time of writing, there was a movement within Adventism towards a reinvigoration of its founding doctrines. I can remember reading online, I think watching, from the Global 2010 Adventist Conference, the denomination's then president's speech, where he several times repeated this line: "Go forward, not backward, Seventh-day Adventists." Adventism's exclusivity and rightness could very well lead to more damaging views of other Christians. Although, of course, we have to remember the fact that there are various different groups in Adventism, and the most moderate Adventists readily recognize as children of God their brothers and sisters in the other churches and fellowships, which of course is right. And they do not claim to be the only true Christians. But then the strictest Adventists probably believe that in the end times only the Sabbath keepers will be saved. And since this man came close to becoming an Adventist, he praises God that God hit him over the head when he did. And he affirms that he loves the Adventists and that he feels somewhat of a calling to reach out to the Adventists, particularly the young who know nothing of its complicated history. But then again, we could make this general statement about the young people of many other Christian denominations and movements. Some because they don't really care, some because they haven't been taught enough. And for example, when young people and young adults complain that this quotation is from a few Finnish evangelical Christians, that issues or problems are silenced to death or killed by silence. It means that there seems to be something to hide on the part of prominent church members. For example, conflicts between pastors, evangelists, elders, different ministry leaders, even in the soundly Bible-believing churches, how much more in those churches whose theology, unfortunately, is heterodox, like that of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, although there is a holy remnant in that church and in the other Christian churches. May God bless all of you.